It began on a night when velvet drapes could not muffle the sound of cannon fire. In the heart of the old city, where perfume once ruled the air, smoke now curled through the streets like whispers of rebellion. And yet, behind the soft glow of lanterns and the polished windows of Maison Valette, everything still appeared untouched, elegant, composed, and deceivingly calm. Lady Elara Valette stood before her mirror, adjusting a crimson ribbon on her gown. The reflection staring back at her was the picture of nobility: pale satin skin, lips painted in rose, hair pinned with pearls. But behind her eyes lived a storm. Outside her boutique, soldiers patrolled like wolves. Inside, she was hiding the one thing that could destroy her world: gunpowder, disguised as luxury. Each week, her carriages left for the countryside, carrying bolts of fabric, perfume bottles, and jeweled accessories. What no one knew was that beneath the layers of silken lace lay rifles, bullets, and forged maps, the lifeblood of the underground rebellion. Elara had not always been a traitor to her class. Once, she was the toast of the capital, the darling of nobles, the queen of style. Her boutique dressed duchesses, courtesans, and queens. Her laughter had once filled glittering halls, her name written in scented ink across every invitation. But then came the year of hunger, when the poor began to march, when soldiers fired into crowds and the cries of the wounded echoed through the marble streets. That night, she had looked from her balcony and seen a boy no older than 15 fall beside the fountain, a red bloom spreading across his chest, and something inside her, something gilded and cold, cracked. From that moment, the seamstress of beauty became a seamstress of revolution. Now every hem she stitched carried risk. Every shipment was a gamble, and every breath she took could be her last. The evening's calm was shattered by the sudden pound on her boutique door. Her maid Colette froze mid-step. "Milady, it's after curfew." Elara's pulse quickened. She motioned for silence, extinguished one of the lamps, and reached for the slender dagger hidden beneath her sewing table. The knock came again, softer this time. 3 short taps, 1 long. The code. She opened the door just enough to see the man outside. A hooded figure leaned against the doorframe, his cloak dark with rain and something thicker: blood. Elara. His voice was rough, nearly broken. "They found us at the river. I had nowhere else." She recognized him instantly. Captain Lucien d'Artois, the rebel courier. The man who had once smuggled messages through her fabric rolls. The man she'd seen only in passing but could never forget. His eyes, even now through the pain, burned with that same relentless fire, the kind that both terrified and tempted her. Without hesitation, she pulled him inside. Lucien collapsed onto the shop's marble floor, leaving a smear of red across the white tile. Colette gasped, but Elara's voice was calm and sharp. "Lock the door. Draw the curtains." In minutes, her boutique transformed from elegance to battlefield. She tore open a bundle of muslin, pressing the fabric to his wound. "You've lost too much blood," she murmured. Lucien managed a strained smile. "I've had worse. Once stitched a bullet wound myself with fishing wire." Elara didn't answer. She worked in silence, hands steady, mind racing. Outside, thunder rolled, blending with the distant boom of cannon fire. She had saved lives before, but never like this. Never someone who could bring the entire guard crashing through her doors if discovered. When the bleeding slowed, she met his gaze. "Why come here?" she whispered. "If they track you—" "They already are," he said softly. "Half the cell is gone. We were betrayed." The words sliced through her. Betrayal, the one thing she feared above all. Lucien gritted his teeth, trying to sit up. "We hid the weapons in the north warehouse. If they find them, the uprising dies." Elara looked toward her storeroom, where stacks of textile crates awaited shipment. She had promised to move them at dawn, a shipment that now could cost her her life. Hours passed. Rain lashed the city, soldiers shouted in the distance, and thunder growled like a wounded beast. Inside the boutique, the faint scent of lavender and blood mixed in the air. Lucien drifted in and out of consciousness. Once his hand brushed hers, a small human thing, yet it sent a tremor through her chest. He was a soldier of the people. She was a lady of silk. Their worlds should have remained apart. Yet here he was, breathing raggedly beneath her roof, his life in her hands. Elara rose and moved to the window. Beyond the glass, lanterns swung in the rain as a patrol passed by. The revolution was no longer a whisper. It was roaring through the streets. She closed her eyes, remembering the silk gowns she once made for generals' wives, the same men now giving orders to crush the starving. Once she had sown beauty for them. Now she stitched destruction. When she turned, Lucian's gaze met hers. Though weak, his voice carried the weight of fire. "You're risking everything for us." "Why?" Her answer came like a confession. "Because your cause stopped being yours the day they spilled innocent blood. Because I am tired of making gowns for monsters." For a moment, silence hung between them. The kind of silence that hums with something unspoken, fragile and dangerously alive. Lucian tried to speak again, but the effort stole his breath. Elara leaned closer, adjusting the bandage. His hand found her wrist, faint, trembling. "If I don't make it?" he began. "Don't," she interrupted. "You will?" And for a moment the storm outside seemed to still. When dawn crept over the rooftops, the city was shrouded in smoke. The cannons had fallen silent, replaced by the grim echo of marching boots. Elara moved quickly, disguising Lucien beneath bolts of velvet in the back room. Colette kept watch by the window. A knock sounded, as sharp, commanding. Not the rebels this time. The royal guard. "Elara Valet," came a cold voice. "By order of the crown, we search all premises for traitors." Her blood turned to ice. She straightened her gown, smoothed her hair, and whispered to Colette, "Hide him." No sound. Then, taking a deep breath, she unlocked the door. 2 guards entered, their uniforms slick with rain, their muskets gleaming. They began overturning boxes, slashing open fabric rolls. And with every tear, Elara's pulse hammered harder. The crates in the storeroom were next. The ones filled not with silk but gunpowder. She stepped forward, blocking their path with a practiced smile. "Careful, gentlemen," she said sweetly. "Those fabrics are delicate, imported from Florence." The taller guard sneered. "We'll be the judge of that." He pushed past her. Elara's world narrowed to the beat of her heart, the sound of boots on wood, the scrape of crowbars, the hiss of rain beyond the door. And then suddenly, a crash. From the back room, Lucien. The guards turned. Elara's hand shot out, knocking over a candelabra. Flames spilled across the floor, catching on velvet, smoke rising in a furious bloom. The soldiers cursed, retreating as fire spread across the boutique. Amid the chaos, Elara whispered to Colette, "Get him out, through the cellar." As smoke filled her lungs and fire licked the walls, Elara watched her boutique, her life. Her mask burned to ashes, but beneath the firelight she felt no regret. Only resolve. The world would think Maison Valette was gone. But from its ashes, something far more dangerous was about to rise. The fire that consumed Maison Valette burned for hours. By dawn, only embers remained, a blackened skeleton of beauty. Twisted iron frames glinting in the smoke. The townsfolk whispered as they passed. Some in sorrow, others in suspicion. "Such a pity," one murmured. "The finest boutique in the capital." "A pity," said another. "But perhaps no accident." And above those murmurs, high in the gray morning air, Lady Elara Valette vanished, like a ghost carried away by the smoke. She had escaped through the old wine cellar beneath the shop, guided by the trembling lantern of her maid Colette, and the faint groans of the wounded man leaning on her shoulder. Lucien d'Artois was alive, barely, his breath ragged, his strength fading with every step. The tunnel led them beneath the cobbled streets to the old catacombs, where the rebels once met in secret. The air smelled of earth and damp stone. There, among shadows and flickering candles, Elara pressed her hand to his cheek. "You're safe," she whispered, though she knew it wasn't true. "You're safe for now." Lucien tried to speak, but his voice came only as a rasp. "You burned it down?" She nodded. "To save you. To save us." For a long time neither spoke. Outside, the city trembled under martial law. Soldiers searched every alley for traitors. But here, buried beneath the ruins, 2 fugitives found a fragile kind of peace. Days passed. Lucien's wounds healed slowly under Elara's care. She used what supplies she could salvage: lavender oil, silk thread, strips of muslin to bind his shoulder. Colette kept watch. bringing whispers from the streets above. "The guards think you fled the capital," she told Elara one night. "Your name is on every gate." Elara only smiled faintly. "Let them believe it. The ashes of my boutique make a fine disguise." But even as she spoke the words, the ache of loss pressed deep. Maison Valette had been her pride, her mask, her fortress. It had also been her last link to the life she once knew. A life of chandeliers, laughter, and meaningless silk. Now she had traded it all for a cause, and for a man bleeding quietly in the dark. Lucien began to regain his strength. By the third night he could sit upright, though every movement sent pain shooting through his body. Elara caught him trying to stand. "You're not ready," she said. "I can't lie here while others die above us," he murmured. "The revolution needs me." She knelt beside him. "And what of me, Lucien? Do you think I risked everything just to bury you here?" He looked at her then. Really looked. The woman before him was no longer the porcelain noble he'd once imagined. The soot on her cheeks, the torn lace at her sleeves, the firelight glinting in her eyes. She looked like someone reborn. "You've done more than most men I've fought beside," he said softly. "But this war will not forgive sentiment. Not even from you." Her heart twisted at his words, though she understood them. Revolution did not love. It consumed. Still, when he reached out and brushed her hand, just a ghost of a touch, the ache in her chest deepened into something dangerous, something she could no longer ignore. The next evening, Elara slipped out in disguise, a cloak of coarse wool, her hair hidden beneath a peasant's scarf. She moved through the rain-slick streets, past shuttered bakeries and boarded homes, until she reached the abandoned printing house by the river. Inside, candles flickered over stacks of weapons hidden under sheets of parchment. Rebel messengers paused when they saw her. "Surprised, my lady," one of them whispered. "We thought you were dead." Elara smiled grimly. "Death is a luxury we can't afford." She found Marcel, the rebel commander, an old friend of Lucien's, rough-faced and wary. He greeted her with a frown. "You've drawn too much attention. The crown believes you helped d'Artois escape." "I did," she said calmly, "and I'll do it again." Marcel slammed his hand against the table. "You think this is a game, Valette? They'll hang you if they catch you." "I've already burned everything worth saving," she replied. "So listen to me. The northern shipment, the one Lucien mentioned, has been compromised. We must move it tonight." Her tone left no room for argument. Marcel studied her, then nodded slowly. "You've got fire in you, Lady Velvet. Perhaps too much." That night, as the rebels loaded crates under the cloak of darkness, Elara moved among them, giving orders, checking routes, watching every shadow for the glint of a uniform. She had traded silk for smoke, diamonds for dirt, and she had never felt more alive. When she returned to the catacombs, Lucien was awake, waiting. His eyes met hers with something unspoken. Pride, fear, longing. "You shouldn't have gone alone," he said quietly. "I had to," she answered. "Your men needed direction." "My men." He smiled faintly. "And what are you then?" "I suppose," she said, her voice soft but sure. "I'm one of you now." Lucien leaned back against the stone wall, watching her. The candlelight painted gold along her cheekbones, flickering across the fire in her eyes. He thought of all the noble women he'd known, painted dolls who whispered of charity while sipping imported tea, and realized none of them had ever looked like this. "You'll be hunted," he murmured. "So are you," she said, simply their silence after, that said more than any words could. By dawn, the rain had stopped. Smoke from distant fires drifted through the catacombs, carrying the scent of gunpowder and loss. Elara awoke to find Lucien gone. Panic struck her chest like a blade. She ran through the tunnels, heart hammering, and found him near the exit, pulling on his coat. "I can't hide anymore," he said. "Marcel needs me at the front." She stepped closer. "You're not ready," he smiled, weary but resolute. "The people don't wait for readiness. They wait for courage." Her voice trembled. "And what if I lose you?" He paused, then gently took her hand, pressing it to his lips. "Then you will fight," he said. "And that will be enough." Before she could speak, he was gone, swallowed by the dawn. That evening, Elara sat alone in the ruins of what once was her boutique. The ashes were cold now, but beneath them, she could still see traces of her old life. A burned mannequin, a melted brooch, a shard of mirror that reflected her new face. She no longer recognized the woman staring back. Above her, the first banners of rebellion fluttered against the gray sky. The people were rising, shouting for justice, for bread, for freedom. And yet, amid the thunder of boots and cries, one name echoed in her heart like a prayer she dared not say aloud. Lucian. The city was becoming a battlefield. And somewhere out there, the man she had risked everything for was fighting, perhaps dying, for the same dream that had already claimed her soul. She rose, brushed ash from her dress, and whispered into the wind, "If you fall, I will rise for both of us." And with that vow, Lady Elara of Veylan, once the crown's favorite dressmaker, disappeared again, this time not into hiding but into history. The city awoke to thunder that wasn't from the sky. Cannon fire rolled through the streets like a heartbeat gone mad, and smoke rose from every quarter, thick, black, and unending. The revolution had broken open at last. The banners of the people, red and gold, fluttered over broken rooftops. In the distance, church bells rang not for prayer, but for battle. And through it all, Elara of Veylan moved like a shadow through the ruins, dressed in the soot-stained remnants of her old life. The noblewoman was gone. What remained was something harder, sharper, and fearless. She had joined the rebels in the old quarter, where soldiers and tailors fought side by side. The smell of burnt cloth and gunpowder clung to her skin, a perfume of defiance. Every face she saw carried a story of loss. Every cry echoed with desperation, but still they pressed on. And in every corner of her mind, one question burned. Was Lucienne still alive? By dusk, she found her answer. A messenger stumbled into the rebel stronghold, his uniform torn, his hands trembling. "Captain d'Artois," he gasped. "He's alive, but surrounded. The royal forces are advancing through the southern gate." Elara's heart lurched. "Where?" she demanded. "Tell me where." "The old bridge, St. Montclair. They've trapped the rebels there. It'll fall by nightfall." She didn't hesitate. Ignoring Marcel's protests, she took a pistol, a lantern, and a horse, and rode into the storm. The city was chaos. Flames licked the edges of mansions, statues lay toppled, and the cobblestones ran slick with rain and blood. Elara galloped through it all, past barricades, past burning markets, past the place where her boutique once stood. The sky above the bridge was orange with fire. The air thundered with musket shots and shouts. The crowned soldiers in polished armor against a ragged army of farmers, blacksmiths, and seamstresses, and in the heart of it, fighting like a man who had nothing left to lose, was Lucien. She saw him just as he fell. Elara. His voice cracked through the chaos as she ran to him, dropping to her knees in the mud. His shoulder bled through his torn coat. His breath came in shallow gasps. "I told you to stay away," he rasped. "And I told you," she whispered, cradling his face, "that I would rise for both of us." Around them, the battle raged, soldiers shouting, gunfire flashing like lightning. But in that small circle of smoke and rain, time seemed to still. Lucien's hand found hers, trembling. "You shouldn't have come." "Then you don't know me," she said, tears cutting paths through the soot on her cheeks. He smiled faintly. "I do, too well." Another blast shook the bridge. Stones cracked, and part of the railing collapsed into the river below. Elara looked around desperately. The rebels were falling back. The royal troops were closing in. She turned back to Lucian, determination hardening her voice. "We can still escape through the old wine barges under the bridge, if we can reach the river." But before she could finish, a musket ball struck the stone beside them, sending shards flying. Lucian flinched, not from pain, but from recognition. "Elara." "Listen to me," he said, voice breaking. "If they take this bridge, they'll march straight into the quarter. Thousands will die. There's gunpowder stored beneath the arch, our last shipment. You must light it." Her breath caught. "You're asking me to destroy the bridge?" "To save the city," he said softly. "To end this." Her eyes widened with horror. "Lucian, you'll be on it." He looked at her then, the firelight flickering in his eyes. The same eyes that had haunted her since the night he stumbled into her boutique. "If I stay, they can't cross," he whispered. This is what it means to fight for something greater. She shook her head, clutching his coat. No, there has to be another way. There isn't, he said gently. But there is something else you can do for me. She leaned closer, trembling. Anything? He took her hand and pressed something into her palm, a small silver button torn from his coat. So you remember, he murmured, that even in ashes there was love. Tears blurred her vision. Lucian, he smiled, the same crooked smile she had seen that first night beneath the rain. Go before they see you. Live for me. And though every fiber of her soul screamed to stay, she obeyed. Elara ran through the smoke and gunfire to the underside of the bridge, where crates of gunpowder lay hidden beneath soaked tarps. Her hands shook as she tore a strip of fabric from her dress, once silk, now stained with soot, and dipped it in oil. Above her, the battle raged. She could hear Lucian's voice shouting orders, his defiance echoing even as the soldiers closed in. When the wick was ready, she struck the flint. The spark flared, then caught. Elara, he had said. For me, she lit the fuse and ran. A moment later, the night exploded. The bridge erupted in a roar of flame, stone, and firelight that split the sky. The shockwave hurled her to the ground, ears ringing, vision white, and then in silence, only the soft hiss of rain falling through smoke. They said later that the Battle of St. Montclair turned the tide of the revolution, that the bridge's fall stopped the royal army from reaching the that a nameless courier gave his life to save thousands. Elara never told them his name. Weeks passed, the fighting ended, the crown fell, the banners of the new republic rose above the charred city walls, and in a quiet corner of the rebuilt market, a small boutique opened once more, its sign painted in simple letters, Valette and Comus Clothiers. Inside, no silks or jewels lined the walls, only plain fabric, sturdy and honest, the kind worn by workers and mothers by soldiers returning home. Elara stood behind the counter, her hands steady, her face calm. To most, she was just a seamstress. But those who looked closer might notice the faint burn scar along her wrist, or the small silver button she wore on a chain around her neck. Every night, when the city fell quiet, she would light a single candle in the window. Not for fashion, not for fortune, but for remembrance. The flame flickered softly, dancing against the glass like a heartbeat that refused to fade. And in that light, she whispered his name, Lucien d'Artois, the man who taught her that love and rebellion were made of the same fire, the man who turned velvet into gunpowder and silk into courage.